So we really need to get the front door of our apartment cleaned off. Our apartment is cluttered with just mud splatter. And see, what happened was about 2 weeks ago, our apartment complex hired these guys to come out, clean the gutters out, and all that stuff. They stuck a notice on everyone's door. These guys are going to come out, going to clean the place up. And right in the middle of the letter it says, and these guys will do their best to clean up whatever debris they scatter around. And they just splat, because there's a gutter right off to the side of our door. I'm sure they just sprayed that with a pressure washer or some shit. And then just blew mud and crap all over our door, and it's still on there. So yeah, when they said they were going to clean it all up nice and good like, they were full of shit. Anyway, Steve the amateur historian out on the road, in case you didn't notice, hearing the sounds of life around me, vehicles, bus back there, guy just passed me on a bike with a mask on, looked like one of those Antifa fellas. So when I started doing this series again, this podcast series, I was, I have a really nice setup where I actually have a really good mic. My friend gave me a good, standard podcast mic. Oh my god, I'm being surrounded by buses right now. Buses on both sides, bruh. And so I have a perfect setup. I had to pause. I was literally in between two buses. I call that being in the vortex. You don't get out of the vortex once you're in there. As I was saying, I have this really nice interior podcasting station set up for me. So to make these things sound a little bit more professional, because before, on my old YouTube channel, it was just me. Whenever I had some time and something to talk about, I just bust my iPhone out like I'm doing right now and turn the audio recorder on. And it's an okay setup, but, it gets okay audio, but it's not as good. You want the best quality you can get. But I am trying to, and this so far has been my best venture yet because I'm actually sticking to my guns. Over the past several years, I've been trying to, improve my health, exercise more, eat better. I'm starting to do all that, but I'm starting to try to do, walks every day. And, a walk is boring when you're just walking around and just kind of looking down, just thinking, yep, walking, still walking around. And it starts to get annoying sometimes. So I kind of have decided to start doing, at least sometimes when I'm doing this, episodes of my podcast. So without further ado, here's an outdoor iPhone episode of EXPLORIAN. Alright guys, I started a podcast a while ago because I wanted to delve into the event in U.S. history that I know the most about. I have over 25 years of studying into it. Yes, I've been studying this since I was 7 years old. Not exaggerating. And that is everybody's favorite conspiracy event. That being the assassination of our 35th president, John F. Kennedy. Yeah, I kid you not. I literally came home from school one day and second grade, I get home, and I'm thinking, oh, woohoo, school's over, and it's second grade, you don't get homework in second grade, I'm free to do what I want for the rest of the day, let's watch some television. But my mom is recording some dumb, boring documentary for my dad, which was the A&E refurbished version of The Men Who Killed Kennedy, which was originally a 5-part documentary series done in 1988, which was the 25-year anniversary of JFK's death. It was British produced documentary, and they've added 4 parts since then. They added another part in 1996, I believe, or actually it may have been 93, because that would be the 30-year anniversary. And then 2003, they had 3 more parts come out, and it was, the original one back in 88 was kind of revolutionary. and that it really kind of revitalized people's concerns and issues with, the way that this story's been presented. Granted, they've kind of changed their perspective over the years, but with these new installments, but still, it was a pretty significant piece of work. And that was what my mom's recording. So I'm like, ugh. But then I sit down and I start watching it, and I have no clue. I'm 7 years old. I don't know what conspiracies are. I don't have a great concept of our government's crooked history and so on. So when I saw that they were arguing that someone who wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald, and even by the time I was 7, I knew Lee Harvey Oswald was the guy that officially had assassinated the president, did the whole thing all by himself. The guy was just the luckiest guy in the world, just a genius, incredible performer under pressure when he needed to be. But then I watched this documentary, and they were talking about how it either wasn't him at all, or he wasn't alone. And just knowing that, seeing this significant historical event shift before my eyes, just completely knocked me over. And that was when I got pulled in. And I've been an avid studier, is that a word? I don't know, of that event literally since 1993. So yeah, about 25 years. And back in 2007, 2008, because it took over a year, I realized, I've been studying this thing for over a decade and I have nothing to show for it. I may as well create something. And I actually wrote a 450-page book arguing that Oswald was not the assassin. Not that he didn't do it alone, not that he had accomplices, but that he wasn't the shooter. I think he was connected to some degree. He would have to be, because he would have to be connected enough that he would be specifically selected to be the fall guy. When a conspiracy this big happens, they're not just going to pick some random guy off the street. They have to pick someone that they can actually, make look that way. And Lee Harvey Oswald, it's no surprise. The government still denies it, but there's been document after document after document shown that he had CIA connections, FBI connections, he had files with these groups. It's abundantly clear that he had connections at a government agency level. And that's troubling enough when you think that, okay, this is the guy the government is saying single-handedly killed the President of the United States. But it's more troubling the fact that they've gone out of their way to deny this. The standard government perspective is that Lee Harvey Oswald was a guy who was disenchanted by leading a mundane, mediocre life, something less than he wanted, and he did what a lot of other killers have done in the past, which is you're kind of a no-name nobody and you want people to know who you are. So you get that recognition by doing something big and grandiose. And that's kind of what's been stapled to Lee Harvey Oswald over the years, because even the commission that was put together to determine what happened, even they couldn't find a motive for why he would do it. Nobody who knew Lee Harvey Oswald said that he made any even critical comments about President Kennedy. And it's so funny that, they used all that Red Scare, domino theory, commies are the spawn of Satan bullshit that was prevalent back then. This is the early 1960s. They used the commie angle to convince America that Lee Harvey Oswald was guilty, when the reality is any communists in America would probably be pretty cool with Kennedy, because Kennedy was a Democrat, and Democrats are a lot closer to in terms of how they believe, technically, to communism than Republicans are. And JFK was trying to find common ground with the Soviet Union. Him and Khrushchev were trying to quell this Cold War thing and prevent a nuclear war from happening. All the Republicans said that they were a bunch of pussies, or that JFK was a stooge for communism because he was discussing things through with the premier of the Soviet Union, when in fact what they were really doing in doing that was they were actually trying to achieve peace, and they prevented our world from fucking being liquidated in a nuclear war. But, we don't have to worry about that. And then Vietnam. JFK's the only president that actually was trying to get us out of Vietnam. And then the moment he really made his push, all of a sudden he winds up dead. Here's a guy that had made enemies with every form of power elite that exists in this country. Every single one of these elite realms, if you can call it that, had somebody that said, man, someone should get rid of, JFK, that son of a bitch, blah, blah, blah. Oil men hated him. People in the CIA hated him. FBI people hated him. People who used to hold high, prestigious positions hated him. All the Cuban refugees that had fled to America after Castro took over hated him. Right-wing extremists hated him. I'm sure there were some elements of the Soviet Union that hated him, even though I think it's crazy that people still peddle the idea that the Soviet Union killed JFK. Or Cuba. So yeah, everywhere you look, people within the White House, even LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, the next president, Kennedy's vice president. Sorry for all the cars that are passing by. Even LBJ benefited greatly from JFK passing away. Now, does that automatically translate to he was involved? Not necessarily, even though that's a very strong theory that people have. One of the most significant things... Oh, I think I'm about to make a friend. Oh, look at this baby. I'm making a friend. Talking about Lyndon... Oh, there's two of ya. I'm talking about Lyndon Johnson. I know Lyndon Johnson gets your blood pumping, doesn't it? I got two black pooches here, and they look excited as can be that there's a young man walking by. Anyway, little known fact, bye babies. They're like, this guy's like, where the hell are you going? No, this is a play day. But yeah, what few people know is that literally on November 22nd, the day JFK died, there was meetings going on regarding Lyndon Johnson and his corruption, which goes back decades, even before he became vice president and then president. And they were pretty much one step away from making that big leap and saying, we're going to charge the vice president of the United States for his crimes, and he's going to be indicted. That was going on the day JFK died. And then Lyndon Johnson gets sworn in as president, and guess what investigation suddenly goes away? It's funny how when you become the president of the United States, you can immediately quash an investigation against you. Little known fact about Lyndon Johnson, and one of many things that makes people think that he was directly involved in this. I can't say for certain, but this is what I had to think about. When I wrote my book, I'm thinking about doing a film sort of based on my book for my channel, maybe like a multi-part series. But I had to think, because everybody who's breathed a breath of life in this world has their own frickin' theory about the JFK assassination. They've written their books, they've written their blogs, they've done their little YouTube videos. And I didn't just want to rewrite or redo a book that somebody else has already done a million times. And something that I hadn't really seen as a specific focus in any books, even ones that were specifically about Lee Harvey Oswald, was just a book that straight up, one focus, addresses the evidence against him. Period. That is the whole thing. Because if you prove that evidence invalid, you prove he didn't shoot at President Kennedy that day. And I'm sure you're hearing some rumbling in the background because I'm right by I-205, wandering through my current hometown of Gladstone. But that was the focus that I chose to take with my book, and that's what I want to discuss in this. This will be a series of EXPLORIAN episodes because this would end up being like 5 hours long if I tried to cram it all into one. I may ultimately make one where it's just a combination of all of them, but as I do the episodes, I'm going to release them individually. I ain't going to walk around talking for 5 hours. I might start losing my mind. But with that little intro completed, I'm going to dive right into this case. And the focus of this particular first EXPLORIAN episode on this matter, the evidence against Lee Harvey Oswald, I'm going to discuss his whereabouts before and during the assassination. You know, what is the evidence that is there regarding where he was and what he was doing? Because if you can't prove that he's where the government says he was, then how can you reach the conclusion that he was the assassin and that he did it in this specific way that you're claiming? So, before I get into that, because I have to presume whoever's listening to this may not necessarily know a lot about the Kennedy assassination, I'm going to run through it real quick. So, less than 2 weeks after there is reports in Miami that someone is going to try to assassinate the president from an office building, or, a tall building with a high-powered rifle, which is how the government says essentially the real assassination went down. JFK is on a trip to Texas. He visits San Antonio and Houston, and then the last leg of his trip is Dallas, and then he's going to take off. And the main reason he wanted to visit Texas is because, as far as states in the South, Texas is about as big as they get. So, here's JFK, Irish Catholic from Massachusetts. He's got to connect with those voters in the South if he's going to get reelected in 1964. So you have to realize this is November 1963. It's 1 year before the next election. So you have to start pre-planning for what is officially just around the corner, the election of 1964. So after a morning luncheon, he arrives in Dallas the morning of November 22nd, 1963. He goes to a luncheon and then gets in his motorcade, and his motorcade is going to drive through Dallas to the Trade Mart in Dallas, where he was going to have another meetup, do another speech, and then he was going to be gone. So this is the last leg of the trip, literally. And so he's driving through Dallas, and the streets are just lined with people. People are so excited to see him, and it really kind of throws everybody. Like, they were not expecting this warm of a reception in Texas, of all places. So they ultimately arrive in a place called Dealey Plaza. It's a small area, and it's right literally as you're leaving the downtown area. So it kind of opens up, and you have 3 roads that converge into one and go under an overpass, go under an overpass that some railroad lines go over. And the 3 roads are Elm to one end, Main in the middle, and then Commerce on the other end, and they all come together to kind of make one road as they go under the overpass. And then the last crossing road before those two cross it, or those three roads cross and then come together, is Houston Street. Well, at the corner of Houston Street and Elm Street is the Texas Schoolbook Depository, which is essentially a warehouse building for taking in, stocking, and shipping out textbooks for the most part. So, like when your school needs to buy, new books, updated books, or, books for new classes and whatnot, there's a place they have to contact, do their ordering through. That order goes to a place like the Texas Schoolbook Depository, and then they get the books together and ship them out to wherever they got ordered from. Simple order delivery. And Lee Harvey Oswald was, as one of his coworkers referred to him, an order filler. So essentially, I guess he would take the orders down for the books that needed to get purchased. And then, those would go to whoever was next in charge, and they'd ship the books out. And what's really interesting, because you have to think, how did Lee Harvey Oswald end up working at this specific place, that specific year? And it just happened to be the spot that JFK was going to drive by on the last leg of his trip to Dallas, and happened to be right where he was assassinated. And what's interesting is there is a couple, Ruth and Michael Payne, who have a very sketchy history that nobody wants to talk about. They kind of befriended Oswald and his wife Marina, more Marina than him. And there's lots of theories about who Ruth Payne was, because she became so invested in Marina's life, and it was almost like she was trying to get her away from Lee. And there's even, as far as widespread theories, there's even theories that she may have had a romantic interest in Marina. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just one of the theories out there. But it is known that Oswald, who was looking for work, got 2 calls to the Payne residence from people that, he'd applied at, saying, hey, we want to talk to him, we want to offer him a job. And she took the calls and was like, oh yeah, I'll let him know when he gets here. And she never let Oswald know. And then a short while later, one of their next door neighbors, who happened to work at the book depository, they start talking about how he needs a job, and he's like, oh, well, I'll get him a job. So the problem in all this is the Texas Schoolbook Depository job paid considerably less to Oswald than these other jobs would have. So why the hell would Ruth Payne just forget, wink wink, to tell Oswald about these job offers, and then push the Texas Schoolbook Depository on him, where he's going to be making considerably less money? But it puts him there on November 22nd, right where JFK gets assassinated. You can't say things like that have no meaning. So anyway, Oswald is working at the Texas Schoolbook Depository, making $1.25 an hour. That's a good amount of money. That'll keep you well-to-do, nice and rich. He even commented when they claimed, he bought this certain rifle that shot the president. The rifle was like, I think it cost like $20 or something. And he was like, how is a guy who's making $1.25 an hour going to afford a friggin' $20 rifle? It's just interesting. I mean, obviously you can look at the real picture and say, well, this guy probably had money coming in from other areas. It's known, there's been pay stubs found that show that he was getting paid by the government at one point. So, but again, if you're looking at this in the perspective of the government's conclusion that he was this lonesome loser that just got pissed and wanted to make a name for himself, all you can acknowledge is that this guy was making barely any money, and then he dropped a bunch of money on a shitty rifle. Like, it doesn't compute. And then he purchases a rifle, mail order, from Chicago. The guy lives, I'm not trying to push stereotypes here, but the guy lived in Texas. All right? You could have gone to any neighbor's freaking backyard and probably found a rifle. He could have gone, this is the 1960s. You think background checking in the 1960s was a big thing? He could have easily gone to some local place, got a gun, boom, on the spot, used a fake name. Nobody would ever known it was him. And even if he used his real name, it stands to reason. This is a guy that lived in Texas. He lived in the South a lot. He knew the way things were. He knew it would be easy as shit to buy a rifle from any random gun store in town. Problem is, if he follows this method, he most likely uses a fake name and gets a rifle that can't be traced to him. So how does the government trace the gun to him after the assassination if he bought an untraceable weapon? There's a rift there. So he had to buy a gun from somewhere far away so that he had to, fill out an order. He had to, write it on an envelope so he could mail the order to them. They had to create a paper trail. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. So, it's November 22nd, 1963. Lee Harvey Oswald has got a work day ahead of him. Even though he's supposed to be, this is supposed to be the craziest day of his life, he's waking up and he's thinking, I'm going to murder the President of the United States today. That's a pretty crazy, demented thought. And you have to think that's guiding you. Well, Mr. Oswald, who they try to claim was thinking about it because he struggled to go to sleep the night before, well, he also sleeps in and almost misses his ride to work. Yeah, clearly he had big plans. Plans so significant that he almost slept through going to work that day. Good morning. Morning. What the hell is this? This guy's on a bike and he's like prophesizing to himself. I don't know if you heard that. The guy just said good morning to me and he was just saying state of being over and over again. I mean, I don't know, whatever floats your boat. I mean, when you're in my position, that's going to look kind of weird. But hey, maybe that's just his mantra. Anyway, God, the interruptions, the bus, the dogs, crazy guy on a bike. So he hitches a ride to work with his friend Buell Wesley Frazier. This is the guy that lived near the Paynes who said, I can get, Oswald will maybe get a job where I work. And Buell Wesley Frazier is a very interesting guy. He wholeheartedly, I think he's still alive. If he is, he's very elderly now. I'm not sure if he's still alive, but he has always maintained that Oswald was innocent. It's always been his stance. I don't believe Oswald did this at all. The way I knew him, I don't think he did this. And yet, his memory of everything kind of half signifies guilt and half doesn't. The biggest trouble, and I'm going to address this further in another episode, is he picks up Oswald on Thursday, November 21st, day before, and Oswald asks him if he can give him a ride the next day, and Frazier, because Oswald usually only stayed with the Paynes on weekends, so Frazier recognizes it's a Thursday and says, hey, why am I taking you out there? It's not the weekend. And he's like, there's some curtain rods that I need to pick up from them to put up in my apartment. And then Friday morning comes and Oswald goes over to Fraser's house, and he's got this little paper-wrapped package under his arm, and he says these are the curtain rods I told you about. Now, the government has, of course, said, well, that was just his cover story. His rifle was really in that package, and that's how he got it to work, without anybody noticing. And even Oswald denied carrying a big package to work. He said that he had like a paper bag with him that he brought his lunch for work with. Now, it seems pretty hard to argue that Oswald didn't have a package. When he arrived at the book depository, Fraser saw him walk off with it, and when he walked into the building, another of his co-workers saw him carrying this package. And again, I'm going to go more into that, but that's a significant part of the story, because the package, as Fraser described it, couldn't have held the rifle, because even if it was broken down, it would have been like several inches too long for the rifle to fit in without it, sticking out one end. So, it's complex, it's confusing. And, the workday goes on. There's chatter through the building. Oh, the president's going to be passing by here today. And a few people mentioned it to Oswald, and Oswald kind of had just a unresponsive, like, okay, he was kind of unresponsive to it, which I'm sure lone gunman theorists, aka people who think wholeheartedly that Oswald was the assassination, I'm sure they look at little details like that and say, see, there's proof. He didn't care that the president was coming, therefore he murdered him. Right? I mean, just, sometimes it gets ridiculous, the lengths that people will go to. But anyway, he goes about his workday. Nothing particular is going on. Nothing strange happens. Nobody acknowledges any awkward behavior on his part. No nervous tension. Nobody sees this package he brought into the building again, as far as people he worked with. And as the official story goes, JFK is supposed to pass by at 12:25 p.m. according to the exact schedule. But he actually ended up passing by at 12:30. I mean, the Texas Schoolbook Depository. That was when he was passing through Dealey Plaza. And the official story is that by about 11:50 or so, Oswald is upstairs. It's approaching noon, which is mealtime. And the story that's followed is he's upstairs. There's, a mix of people upstairs. They go downstairs, and he never goes down with them. That's the argument that's peddled, that he just stayed up there. Because everybody goes down for lunch. He's up there alone. Nobody's gonna, encounter him. He's got that whole 6th floor to himself, so he can probably pull off the assassination, and then no one will see it. Or no one will see him, to put it directly. So, they have a witness, this guy Charles Givens, who reportedly goes downstairs and realizes he left his cigarettes upstairs, and he ends up, I think he took the elevator. Whatever the case, he went back upstairs. He gets up to the 6th floor a couple of minutes before noon, and he sees Oswald up there, just loafing around. Says something effective like, hey boy, you going downstairs? And he said no. Givens didn't think another thing about it, went back downstairs. So officially that puts Oswald on the 6th floor around 11:55 a.m. And that's the official story. And the crazy thing is, people stick with, that's lone gunman theorists stick with that story. That's why, when you read what lone gunman theorists, again, people who say Oswald did it alone, when you read what they have to say, what they say is entirely based around the notion that the work of the Warren Commission, who did the, government investigations that Oswald did it, they base it around the idea that the Warren Commission's investigation was 100% accurate. That everything they did, they were using accurate information, accurate details, accurate eyewitness accounts. They took in everything, which they didn't even come close to doing. Anybody who made the suggestion that Oswald was not the assassin was either dismissed or not even called as a witness, even if they were a serious witness. And then people that had nothing to do with the case got called as witnesses. I mean, it was insane. It was a total botch job. Intentional. I mean, it was so absurd that multiple members of the commission itself, which these are like prestigious senators, many of which didn't really like JFK, and yet, you know, within the first couple of years of this investigation they do, there's already many of them that are saying this investigation is inaccurate. We don't agree with the conclusions. The members of the frickin' commission. So, the problem with this official story that Oswald just kind of stayed up there after like 11:55 and never came back down, and then just was up there, president comes by at 12:30 and he shoots him. Problem is, that's been proven to be impossible by multiple means. Namely, there was a book depository employee named Bonnie Ray Williams who spends his meal break in the exact same spot as where Lee Harvey Oswald is supposed to be sitting and waiting for the president to go by. The southeast corner of the 6th floor of the Texas Schoolbook Depository is the official spot where Oswald crouched behind some book boxes, prepped his rifle, and shot JFK. Well, Bonnie Ray Williams just happened to be eating his lunch there until at least 12:20. 5 minutes. What you looking at, bird? There's this bird on the street side, and he's just bugging me. Just cawing. That's right. Fly away, bruh. So Bonnie Ray Williams is right where Oswald is supposed to be. And yet the government says there was nobody up there except Oswald. And so the problem with this is Bonnie Ray Williams doesn't leave the 6th floor until about 12:20, and maybe even later. He sees nobody up there the whole time. Hears nobody, sees nothing. He eats his lunch by the window, and then he goes downstairs to the 5th floor where he joined a couple of other co-workers to watch President Kennedy go by. So they're directly under the 6th floor, pretty much where Oswald is supposed to be. And they don't hear anything until the actual assassination event itself. Nobody sees Oswald go up or down the staircase. And it's known that he didn't use the freight elevator that they had. He had to have used the staircase to go up all the way to the 6th floor and to come all the way down. Now, why do I say he had to go, nobody saw him going up to the 6th floor, if the government says he was already there before noon even? Well, the problem is, more than one Texas Schoolbook Depository employee saw Oswald on either the 1st or 2nd floor around noontime. Multiple workers, not just one Charles Givens, whose story is a little shaky, and in his affidavit of the day's events, he didn't even mention this fairly significant event of seeing Lee Harvey Oswald on the 6th floor and being the last witness to see him before he shot the president. There's no references in his account to this story until a little while after the assassination, and the Warren Commission needed a witness. They needed someone to prove that he was up there. So, even though there was multiple employees that saw him downstairs after Givens supposedly saw him, again, Commission just ignored them. And the most significant one, you have Bonnie Ray Williams not leaving the 6th floor till 12:20. You have another depository employee named Carolyn Arnold who sees Oswald around 12:15, maybe even as late as 12:20. And Oswald is sitting in the lunchroom on the 2nd floor in the midst of eating his food. Like, no sense of urgency. He's just sitting there eating. He's not looking around nervously. He doesn't have one leg sticking out from the table like, the moment no one sees me, I'm booking it upstairs. This is 5 to 10 minutes before the president is supposed to arrive. And he's sitting in the lunchroom 4 floors down, eating his food like nothing's going on. I mean, it's insane to think the man that shot the president would not be up there 5 to 10 minutes before he's supposed to pass by. It's going to take him a minute or two just to get up to the 6th floor. And then he's got to cross the whole, he's got to traverse the whole floor to get to the southeast corner. Then he's got to get his gun out of his bag, get it prepped, get it loaded, sight in the rifle. The guy didn't even have anything to properly mount his rifle on. He literally supposedly stacked a couple of book boxes and loosely just balanced his rifle on that. It's insane. What? It's like, okay, I'm going to go, kill the president today, but I'm going to not remotely plan or not be remotely prepared. This is a guy that, again, according to the government, this guy was in the Marines for almost 3 years, and he's supposedly this great marksman, which is not accurate, and I'll talk about that more at another time. He's supposedly this great damn marksman. He had all this training. This is a guy that, if that's all true, would know how to properly set up a rifle and how to give himself the best, possible setup. And what does he do? He goes to the corner window of the Texas Schoolbook Depository. There's a big pole behind him that he's ramming his elbow into. He's crammed. He can barely even get his head down to look at the rifle. He has the window only cracked open slightly, which means he'd have to be like sitting sideways on his, crouched down or something. And he's got a shitty rifle. And he waits till the last possible second to get up there. It makes no sense. Why? Because it didn't happen. Lee Harvey Oswald was never on that 6th floor. He just wasn't. At least, not after he got his work done up there, like around 11:45 or whatever, when multiple employees saw him. But he was there telling his coworkers, hey, when you guys are done, send the freight elevator back up for me. Like, hey, I'm coming down too to do lunch. So you have him saying, hey, I want to come down too, I'm going to eat lunch. You have multiple people then, a few minutes later, see him downstairs where he said he was going. And then, several minutes after that, you have a witness to him eating his lunch in the freaking lunchroom. Nobody sees him go upstairs. All right? This is a warehouse building with steps. Those old beat up steps. When you go upstairs, it's like, right? It's loud. It's reverberating. Somebody would have heard him even if they weren't on the staircase. And yeah, I know most employees weren't up there at that point, but still, even his coworkers that were on the 5th floor, they would have heard something. And they heard nothing until, reportedly, when the shooting took place, they heard a couple of kinks. And that was, they claim that was, like, cartridges hitting the ground. Oh my God. I just had the scare of my life. The freaking guy that went by me earlier, I don't know if you heard that, he just started making, like, cawing sounds. But as I saw him coming towards me, the distractions I'm getting, I don't even know how I'm still doing this podcast and keeping focused. I saw the guy coming towards me, and he looked exactly like my father. I'm almost hoping because my hair is really long right now, I'm almost hoping that if he did see me, he wouldn't recognize me. But I kind of doubt that. So I see this guy coming, which, by the way, long story short, I have an estranged relationship with my father. I've been estranged from him since 2009. When I see him, I'm cordial with him, but I don't really have any reason to spend a lot of time with him. So when I see him, I'm immediately like, oh shit. And looking at that guy in line, I thought it was my father. Whew. My heart's racing still. And then he went by and he made a bunch of weird noises. I realized it's that guy that passed me like 10, 15 minutes ago that was doing his mantra. Oh my God, I can't keep it together. I'm losing my mind. And furthermore, my dad lives in Gladstone. I could totally see him randomly being around, and I don't know what's going on in his life. As far as I know, he hasn't had a job since like 2010, 2009. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see him having to go around on a bicycle because he can't afford to have a car anymore. Then again, I can't afford to have a car either, so I'm not one to judge, but woo! This whole thing may have been a blunder. But anyway, as I was saying, so we're on the topic of Oswald. He's down on the second floor lunchroom right before the assassination happens. Who the F would be doing that in his regard? Probably someone who wasn't planning on killing the president in 10 minutes. But what further bolsters, because you could still argue, okay, in the wildest of scenarios, Oswald suddenly gets up, grabs his package, the curtain rod box, because it sounds wrong the other way, and he just bolts upstairs. No one sees him, no one hears him, he just gets lucky. Gets himself propped real quick, and just manages to get his nerves under control and pulls off the assassination. In the wildest world of scenarios, okay, maybe, perhaps, slightly, possibly, against all odds, that could happen. Doesn't make any sense, but maybe, possibly, under once in a blue moon, that could happen. But what adds to the trouble of the official story is a motorcycle officer who was riding in the motorcade named Marion Baker, who he's going down Houston Street towards the book depository when the shots occur. He thinks he hears them from ahead and high up, and that's the book depository essentially. Because for one, I'm just going to say it right now, there was somebody in the book depository with a gun. I wholeheartedly believe that. I just don't believe it was Oswald. But, if you're going to make him look like, if you're going to make him the fall guy, but he's not actually going to be the guy doing it, you have to present a scenario wherein you can argue that Oswald was the guy. So you had to put somebody in that building with a gun somewhere. So, it makes sense. They may have had someone hiding up there when Bonnie Ray Williams was there. Bonnie Ray Williams may have almost blown the whole thing off. Imagine if he ate his lunch a little bit longer. Then again, whoever was up there probably would have just shot him and then blamed Oswald for that too. Obviously when they, Williams and some other guys were down on the 5th floor, they heard what they thought were, shells hitting the floor above them. And there were multiple witnesses that saw someone or someone's, in that vicinity. So obviously they would put somebody there. Because if nobody sees anybody up there, how is anybody going to argue that Oswald was up there? They got nothing to go on. So Marion Baker hears shots that are ahead of him and high up, which also could have been the Daltex building across the street where a lot of people believe shots came from. But anyway, he sees the flock of pigeons fly off the roof of the building. They hear the gunshot, they fly away. And his police intuition tells him they're shooting from the book depository. So he guns it, stops in front. He's actually caught on video. You can see him getting off his motorcycle and sprinting, almost falling on his face, sprinting into the building. He runs around real quick, comes in, asks where the elevator is. The elevator, there was some issue going on with that damn elevator. Oswald couldn't take it. Baker couldn't take it. So, next question, where's the stairs? They say they point him the stairs, and he starts sprinting up the staircase, wraps around up to the 2nd floor. So logistically, you run through this. From the moment the shots occur, Baker himself even said he was into the book depository within seconds. Like 15, 20 seconds at the worst. He runs in. Where's the elevator? Oh, elevator's nowhere. Okay, where's the stairs? Right there. Boom. Up the stairs to the second floor. I mean, we're talking, what? Maybe 45 seconds at the most? At the most. This is if Baker is like lumbering. You know, he needs to hit the gym. And he hasn't got it yet. Kind of like me. I'm getting a little woozy right now. Because I'm just getting back into this walking. So maybe 45 seconds at the worst. Well, I believe it was the Discovery Channel. It was one of those, Discovery Channel, History Channel, and TLC, one of them. They did their own, of course, very slanted, inaccurate recreations of how quickly could Oswald have, finished shooting, hit his rifle, gotten all the way down to the second floor lunchroom, because when Baker gets up to the second floor, he catches a view of Oswald walking away from the door with a partially drank Coke in his hand. And he barges into the room, holds a gun up to Oswald, like, hey, who are you? Roy Truly, the guy who was superintendent of the building, knows everyone there. Baker says, like, who's this guy? Does he work here? Trying to clear him as a possible shooter. Truly says, yeah, he works here. Baker's off to go further up. This means that in the same time it took for Baker to roll up, jump off his bike, sprint into the building, figure out where the stairs are, go up one floor, and the entryway into the lunchroom is dead ahead from that staircase. I've seen the schematics of the second floor of the book depository as of 1963. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. In the time it took Baker to do all that, Oswald would have had to hide his rifle, run across the 6th floor, go down 4 floors of stairs, again going completely unseen. And it's known that there were 2 employees, Sandra Stiles and Victoria Adams, worked in the depository, and they, after the shooting, immediately went over to the staircase, started running down the stairs to, see what was going on. And they were below Oswald. And they were going down the stairs fairly quick, but they weren't, running for their life pretty much. They heard no one, saw no one. And when you consider the fact that they weren't even, sprinting or anything like that, you have to think Baker got to the second floor lunchroom before they did. There's no way Oswald could have gotten around them without being seen or heard. At least heard. So, of course, Stiles and Adams, 2 more witnesses, the Warren Commission just decided, screw it. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're confused. They're just a couple of young ladies prone to flights of fancy. All that nonsense. So they were ignored in the official investigation, even though they showed clearly that Oswald did not run down the stairs in the immediate aftermath of that shooting. And yet, that's exactly what he would have had to do. If he's going to be in the lunchroom already, some 45 seconds after the assassination when Baker goes in. And the Warren Commission, acknowledging the, not even unlikelihood, the impossibility that Oswald could do all this in 45 seconds. And then he appears on the second floor lunchroom, calm, cool, and collected. He's not breathing heavily after shooting the president, which is gonna jack your adrenaline up. I don't care who you are. And then he sprints downstairs. All of that insanity. And he's not even breathing. Nothing's odd. Marion Baker says he looks absolutely fine when he sees him in the lunchroom. Well, the commission clearly noticed that this was an issue. So they had to create the impression that Baker took a lot longer. The official story says that it took Officer Marion Baker 90 seconds from his moment he began reacting to the shooting to when he saw Oswald. 90 seconds it took for him to do that. And you know what's really crazy about all this? That is the number figure they came to when they told Baker to walk. They literally said, do everything at a walking pace. Parks his motorcycle, and they probably had him roll up to the depository at like 10 miles an hour or some shit. And then walk into the building. Walk up to the people when you talk to them. Walk upstairs, because you have no sense of urgency. You're not just potentially trailing someone that just tried to shoot the president. And when he walked, that's where they got that 90-second figure from. They had him do it at a slow jogging pace, 75 seconds. So when you think about all logistics in the matter, that any officer of the law would have been running at full speed, 45 seconds at the most, is all the more sensible. But the commission needed to give Oswald ample time. They needed to give him time to stash his weapon, get across the floor, go downstairs, and have 20, 30 seconds to catch his breath. Backtracking, I started to reference there was one of those TV channels, Discovery, TLC, whatever. All these channels that are great at making documentaries where they try to disprove conspiracy theories with bullshit. Jim Mars, who was a newspaper reporter in Dallas, and he studied the JFK assassination until his death. He actually just died a few months ago. And he actually taught a class, I think, university class on the assassination. Little bit of an oddball, he had some theories about other stuff that I don't necessarily agree with, but he was really invested in the JFK assassination, and I watched this little video he did, and he talked about something that really bothers me about, 21st century, everything's about computer graphics, and the lone assassin theorists have gotten very big into the using computer graphics and, simulations to show that Oswald could have and absolutely did kill the president on his own. The problem is, and I talked about this a little earlier, is the people that are on this side, they follow the notion that all the information that the Warren Commission gathered is accurate. So, and then some of them just go based on theories. There are so many theories that, this exact moment there was a gunshot. This exact moment there's a gunshot that was unaccounted for. And people will take those theories and then create a computer simulation for it, an unproven setup, and then they're like, see, there we go. This computer simulation shows that Oswald killed Kennedy. No, it doesn't. And people have used horribly inaccurate data that the Warren Commission had. And they use that data to create computer simulations that can show that Oswald did it. Well, if your computer simulations are using inaccurate information and the one solid conclusion you're reaching is that Oswald absolutely was the killer, it all fits, then that means it wasn't him. Like, insane. And one of these shows, they even used the book Depository to, make it look super legit. They had this guy traverse the area that Oswald would have, and they had him walk it. And I think he made it in like 40 to 45 seconds. So he still would have probably been seen going into the room by Baker under those regards. But when they're doing the simulation, first of all, there's edits in the film. It's not one solid clip. So there could easily be moments where they cut, a few seconds out here, a few seconds out there. If you want to do it logistically, you have to have one solid shot. And they have this guy in a book depository on the 6th floor where there's no book boxes to navigate around, which Oswald would have had to do. And when they have him hide his rifle, they literally have the guy walk up, stop for a second, set the rifle down, walk away. When the place where the supposed murder weapon was found, he would have had to climb up over boxes, squeeze in there, and squeeze it was a really hard spot to reach. It was so well hidden that the 6th floor had been searched for several minutes by several officers before they even found the rifle. So it's completely inaccurate to equate how Oswald hid this rifle to just stop for a second, set the rifle down, walk away. But, for the average person who doesn't know much about the assassination, they see, oh, this guy's actually walking through the book depository. He's there where it happened. So this must be accurate. It was total garbage nonsense. And of course the objective was they show the guy walking. To show that oh, he could have walked downstairs and thus not been winded when Baker saw him. Who is going to shoot the President of the United States after sneaking up and hiding on the 6th floor, supposedly? Who is then, after the assassination, going to just slowly, casually walk downstairs? When, if you're up there on the 6th floor, you got to know once you're done shooting, people are going to hear the shots, and they're going to target your general area. Okay? Why would he take his time getting out of that sniper's nest? And if he ends up back on the 2nd floor, then obviously that would have had to be his plan. I'll say, hey, I'm going to come down and eat lunch too. And then after the assassination, he's found in the lunchroom. You could say that's almost an alibi. Well, so you have to see what the problem is here. The commission's trying to argue, oh, he could have walked down there. But he wouldn't have. Nobody would have. Again, the most cold-blooded, calculated, callous assassin in the world. Once they're done, in a situation like that, they are going to get the F out of there. And that's what Oswald would have done, which means he would have been winded as hell when he was seen by Baker, if he could have even made it there before him. And I think best case scenario, they pretty much come out on the 2nd floor at the same time. More likely, Baker gets there a second or two early, but they probably would practically collide. Oswald going towards the lunchroom, Baker running to go past it to get to the stairs to go to the 3rd floor. So you have verifiable evidence that Oswald couldn't have been on the 6th floor. He just couldn't have. You have nobody seeing him go up there. You have nobody seeing him go down. The last several people who logistically see him, he's on the 2nd floor in the lunchroom, minutes before the assassination. And then, in my opinion, based on all evidence and logistics, here we are, less than a minute after the assassination, Oswald is freaking still in the lunchroom. Nothing has changed. So, you see the problem here. And you have to see the plain, simple truth that the official case about what Oswald was doing, where he was in the moments around his assassination, you have to see how that is not accurate. It's not even close to accurate, and it ignores the preponderance of the evidence. If they wanted to make a case for this specific case, where all the valid evidence was included in a completely uncorrupted, legitimate court proceeding, the Warren Commission would be thrown out on their face. The judge would probably hold them in contempt for bringing such an absurdly, chaotically inaccurate and unprepared case based on completely misrepresenting the facts. Oswald wasn't on the 6th floor at 12:30. He sure as hell wasn't up there at 12:25 when the president was scheduled to go by. There's nothing that makes sense about this. And then Oswald reportedly, after his encounter with Baker, walks out the front entrance of the book depository, where all the police and people are gathered. Does that sound like the action? I mean, maybe if he's the most confident human being in the world, he, walks right out there and is like, I'm just kidding. But he could have snuck out. There was a back entrance. He could have easily snuck out. Nobody really got back there for several minutes. It would have logistically been the smart way to go. And another crazy aspect, because again, the government's story has been Oswald did all this alone. That's it. Set in stone. Well, as many as 6 to 7 witnesses saw, in the moments after the shooting, when the chaos was still going on, they saw a man who they described as either Oswald or his identical twin sprint out from by the Texas Schoolbook Depository. He dived into a dirty Rambler station wagon, which then sped off and was never pursued. I think in the chaos, the traffic jam, they just got away. One of the people that saw him was Roger Craig, who was a Dallas police officer who saw a lot of things that day. And you could argue that this was just a guy trying to get attention because he reported on a lot of things that nobody else in the Dallas police were reporting on. You could say he was just a guy trying to get attention, but this guy never wrote a book. He never tried to get, an excess of recognition. He just tried to do the right thing. His life was threatened numerous times, and by the mid-70s, he was practically a paraplegic after a really bad car accident. He was on some really harsh medication that caused severe mood swings. His wife had just left him. Pretty much everybody had abandoned him. The, Dallas police kicked him off, essentially, because, he was saying too much. And he was found shot to death, I think, at his home in 1975. And a lot of people think that he was just another witness who was finally gotten to. It's known that his life was threatened numerous times. But I kind of tend to believe that it really was a suicide. I think he'd lost pretty much everything he had. His body was fried. He was being constantly threatened on a daily basis. And he was on a medication for his injuries that was known to cause depression and suicidal thoughts, on top of everything else this guy was going through. So it seems fairly logistic to me that he probably did commit suicide, although I won't deny that there weren't oddities to the case. Like, apparently he pointed a shotgun into his chest and shot himself, which would be a very awkward suicide, if anybody could even pull that off. But so there's that story, and of course the Warren Commission denies that Oswald fled with somebody else in a station wagon because that shows accomplices.